as one person pointed out when they put a set flats are the very cheapest thing you can build in game, and they started with putting that in the exact center of the city, and they're like, these are really cheap and they're not worth anything, but they're in the center of the city, so that should make them worth a lot more.
Yeah.
Right? Even as flats. So our game right now doesn't reflect that at all. But it does reflect very clearly that those flats get more valuable when they've got a school near them, when they've got a park near them, when they've got that. And so the relative placement of things. Because even within absolute zoning, even when you've got zoned this area for housing and this area for industrial or this area for commercial, you're going to have areas within those zones that are more or less valuable based on where they are and what they're bordering.
So this is what she's talking about, is like if you put the flats in the center, and these are the synergies, that, like right now, the only thing that's important is what's adjacent to this particular thing, and has nothing to do with the actual board itself. And that's actually something that it's one thing we need to talk about, is what are the cheap ways we could do that between now and the summer program.
There's like each of these locations is completely equal before you put something down, but that's not true in an actual city.
Although later in the game, though, it becomes important, because who claimed which spot means. So later in the game, this could all be filled, and we still have to play for 5 more turns, which means we need to demolish buildings and renovate them.
And where you place buildings becomes really relevant.
Because then it's like, well, I've got these 4 buildings I'm trying to relate this new building to, but also I might not own that. Somebody else might own it. So I need to afford not just building the thing there, but paying the other person off in order, because they kind of own the spot for me to reclaim the spot.
Personally, I think that can be because of the cost of transportation, because as the density grows, as the sprawl grows, you have to, like, the center point gets an advantage because it's closer to everywhere else, and so that the value increases as a compensation for the for the safe transportation cost.
Well, and I can think of a couple of different ways to express it. One might be one idea we've played around with is starting with a few things already on the board. So, for example, a historic site or a set of factories, a factory or two over here in the outskirts, and a historic site over here that's all run down, and things like that. And then, or putting like just a river, and the river suddenly increases the value, and having the spaces have values, and have those base values of the spaces adjust as you build things on them.
Because one of the conversations I would have liked to have with some of the students, but we just weren't able to because of time and language barriers, but things like, is the city, what year is the city right now? Is this 1962? Is it 1968? Is it 1984? Like, what did they think it is?
The layout.
In terms of the layout, but also just like when and where do you see wide swaths of land that aren't a city but will soon be a city in China? Like when you go from the communes and the agriculture into these city centers, like we saw in Horatur, it's always been a capital of the province. It has the big temple in the center, and it now reflects this like kind of downtown city center. And we saw like this part of it is that's like the luxury district that were driven through back and forth from the airport. And the part that Professor Ron designed, like, it was just like a big flat grassland up until 6 years ago. Now here's all these towers.
And now it's one of those expensive corners of the city, even though it's on the edge of the city. Because it's being built to be this luxury center. I also have the desire to have both a smaller board and a bigger board.
Well,
Right? So.
Also, I think, in some previous sessions, was it Dr. Hong or David suggested we incorporate real maps of Chinese cities, which can be really exciting.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't get us what we're talking about though. I mean, that's interesting representationally to kind of show like here's what a real city's like, but that's when you go into the land of simulation. And our goal has been to keep this as game, to keep this as a playful experience mainly so that there is. So what I want the students to do in the summer program is to question the game, not to see it as an authority figure, but instead to see it as a communication tool, as a way to relate the things that they're learning and then translate that back into the game as a way for us to both assess what they've learned, but also it's that kind of mental model conceptualization that where you see students like actually start to get it. So similarly, we've got a game about relativity and special relativity, and I could just say, here's how everything works, right? And they can just like get that feedback, get that information, and then find whatever. But by putting them in a situation where they start questioning, well, why things are working the way they do, and then I ask them questions, so they can kind of run it as a lab or as an experiment. So in this game, then I can say, all right, so what happens when you do X, Y, and Z in the city? And they can think about, okay, well, this is probably what it should do. And then we try it out, and then we see how it works, or if it works or if it fails. But even better, they can try it out, see how it's not working, and then say, all right, so what do we need to change in order to make that work, in order to better bring that into the game?
Yeah.